Good morning, everybody. Just give it a few minutes, let people join, but thank you very much for joining us this morning. There's still a couple of people joining, so just give me another 30 seconds or so. Yeah, brilliant. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all having a good week, and yeah, great to see we're finally into February, which is good to have January over. So, just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Jonathan Reinhardt. I'm a BIM consultant here with Diatech, working with Diatech almost 2 years now, and across the course of about 6 years, previous to that, I've done a lot of work with them. So my own background is in the architectural industry as a chartered architectural technologist, BIM management, and then day to day with Diatech, I'm doing BIM consultancy, BIM implementation, and BIM training, primarily around Autodesk BIM tools such as Autodesk Construction Cloud, Revit, Navisworks, all of that kind of good stuff that we see happening on some great projects across Ireland, across the UK, and even further afield as well. So if you have any kind of BIM training requirements or anything like that, feel free to get in contact with us as well after this webinar. So today what we're going to look at we're going to be looking at a certain specific area of Autodesk Construction Cloud. I know in previous sessions we've covered Autodesk Construction Cloud. So what we're going to look at today effectively is construction checklist workflows. So primarily coming from a contractor's perspective, but I mean construction checklist workflows can expand to designers as well that are on construction sites, carrying out inspections, whether that's BCAR inspections or fire protection inspections. It could be subcontractors or supply chain. But the key thing here is what I want to demonstrate is how you utilize checklists within Autodesk Construction Cloud. And again, that can be for contractors, subcontractors, design teams, for generating and capturing that type of construction stage information as well. And the area that we'll be looking at is Autodesk Build. So that's one product within Autodesk Construction Cloud. And I'll briefly explain Autodesk Construction Cloud in a moment, just for those of you who maybe weren't on previous webinars. It's a certain function inside Autodesk Build, and it allows you to create custom forms, answer questions on site, take photographs, and associate questions and photographs together, and potentially raise issues against perhaps non-conformance or non-compliance issues on site, whether that's regarding building regulations, design quality, health and safety, installation of any type of asset or construction related materials on site. Construction checklist workflows will be all encompassing in terms of that as well. So hopefully there's something for every type of discipline to take something away from this today. So just to kind of lay the context of where Autodesk Build and where the checklists actually fit in, I'm just going to show you the kind of bigger picture of Autodesk Construction Cloud. So Autodesk Construction Cloud it's a cloud-based tool, as it says in the name. It's primarily accessed through a web browser, but there's a mobile app. The mobile app is actually called PlanGrid, the PlanGrid app. So if you have Autodesk Build, in fact, if you have Autodesk Docs, you can actually access that app today. You may not have the full functionality that we look at today, but you can still access that app, and it's called the PlanGrid app, and it's on iPhone, Android and Apple stores as well. So Autodesk Construction Cloud, it's hosted in the cloud, accessed mainly through a web browser, but there's lots of different ways to connect to it, drag and dropping files, from inside Revit, from inside Navisworks. But primarily what we're going to be looking at today is Autodesk Build itself. Autodesk Build is one of the 4 products that make up Autodesk Construction Cloud. So we have Autodesk Docs at the bottom, Autodesk Takeoff, BIM Collaborate Pro, and Autodesk Build. Sorry, I just noticed that my face is probably in the way there. I'm just going to minimize that. Okay, there we go. So Autodesk Build, BIM Collaborate Pro, which is kind of a Revit integration tool, Autodesk Takeoff, which is pre-construction quantification and material and quantifiable takeoff, and then Autodesk Docs, which is probably best known for its file storage, but it's a lot more than a file storage, a common data environment designed for design and construction related information, and for the types of organizations that would need to utilize a construction focused common data environment to store their files. So when we speak about Autodesk Build, effectively all of these different products have certain different features and functions within inside them as well. BIM Collaborate Pro is for design collaboration and things like clash detection inside model coordination. Takeoff, as I've mentioned, for estimation. Autodesk Docs does a lot as well in terms of setting up your folder structure, your common data environment, and controlling all of that kind of area. But Autodesk Build actually sits on top of Autodesk Docs. So if you have files in Autodesk Docs, you can access them in Autodesk Build as well. It's just to kind of highlight that, because when we look at checklists today, for example, it's important to understand that you can associate a checklist potentially with a document, whether that's a drawing, whether it's a spec document, or whether it's an RFI or something else that sits within the platform as well. So Autodesk Build, then on the right hand side, you can see there's lots of different features and functionality in that, and we're only going to be looking at one very simple one today, and that's checklists. I will be explaining some, I'll call them additional workflows that you can use alongside checklists, things like assets, and how you also interact with things like site observations and non-compliance, even non-conformance issues, and generating reports from those as well. And I'll hopefully show how the whole flow of that information can potentially work. It's quite dynamic in terms of, different organizations will have different needs for different information. For example, a checklist being executed on site by a design team or design consultant, architect, or structural or civil engineer, or mechanical engineer, they're going to have a slightly different need for a checklist requirement on site than maybe the main contractor or maybe a subcontractor within the supply chain may have as well. So this system allows for that customization of the types of checklists as well. So again, it's relevant to architects, all types of engineers, civil, structural, mechanical, as well as all types of contractors as well, and subcontractors on top of that as well. So it's kind of setting the scene of where we're going to fit in with checklists today. It's one of many features within the platform as well. So we certainly won't be diving into all the other good stuff on this particular session, but we will on future sessions. So as you can see here, again, this is just the 4 products broken down into a lot more detail. And what we're going to be focusing on is the checklist feature that you will see sit across some of these kind of quality or safety areas as well, that we can also utilize them on as part of that as well. And all, as I said, things like photographs and site observations can be integrated. So Autodesk builds just these kind of 5 blocks here as well. And we're just focusing on one very simple element of it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to briefly just jump into Autodesk Construction Cloud inside the web browser. I do have my iPad in front of me as well, so I'm going to do some screen sharing on the iPad, because as we know, you're not going to walk around site with a laptop. Well, I certainly hope not. It may not be safe. You're not going to walk around site with a laptop doing a checklist. You can do it on an iPad, which is probably the most practical way, or you can do the same with a mobile device, such as the mobile phone, Android or Apple as well. But for purposes today, I've got an iPad. And currently, so what I have here is I've logged into my Autodesk Construction Cloud. So I logged in using my username, my licensing is associated with my username, and I've come into a particular project that I have here. So this is a single project. It could be any, construction. It can be a residential complex with, lots of different disciplines involved in it as well. And when inside this project, then I've got various different features available to me. I've got my docs environment for my folder structure. My common data environment primarily sits in there. So I've got, I'll have my work in progress, my archived, published, shared, all of those type of areas available to me in there as well. So all of those files sit within the platform as well. And again, what we're going to be looking at is just that very simple element of a checklist, potentially using some of this information. So there, for example, is a set of drawings that fit within the platform. But again, this is the same project. You'll see the name up here, same project. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come back into build. So I'm just going down to my drop-down menu, into my module selector. And then what you'll see when you're in build, you've got quite an extensive number of features. It brings me to a home screen and it shows me various different things on my home screen. So it will actually show me things like if I've, a certain number of draft forms due to be completed, for example, and kind of high level information regarding issues and RFIs on my home screen. But if I actually navigate to the form section on the left-hand side, what I'm going to see is any forms that are available to me on my project. Now, because I have complete blanket access to the project, I am an account administrator, so I can see every project, every form within the project. I can see draft forms and submitted forms. If potentially you wanted to restrict access for certain users, you can do that as well. So for, maybe one particular subcontractor, they only need to see a certain set of forms that are relevant to them. So you can customize the platform to only make those type of forms available to those users as well. And you can customize what roles and what individuals are involved in certain forms as well. So it's not just free for all, well, you've got a lot of forms and people trying to figure out what they have to pick. You can customize it by just setting up certain user roles, and I'll talk through that a bit when I get through on get into it on screen as well. So what I have here is I have a list of folders that I've created, and all of these folders have different types of templates of forms that I've created in them. So what I did initially was I created a template of a form. I'm not going to go into that just yet, but just to explain, that's the kind of structure that we're looking at for the forms. Every line item you see here is a different form that may be executed on site. So for example, here's a very simple one, a door installation on site. The form name is called door install. And various questions and photographs required, and then the signature at the end. So this is a very simple form. Probably 4 or 5 questions in this. Maybe not as realistic as we see on site, but you can create quite other extensive named forms as well. So I'm just looking for one I've submitted previously. So I've got other kind of longer forms that I'm going to be able to show you in a moment as well. But just I suppose as a rule, they're the type of forms we're looking at. There are a series of questions that we can associate information with. There are other types of forms. You can also generate things called a smart PDF. You can upload your own PDF if you wish. You can upload your own PDF and you can have a form that looks in your own format similar to this. All of this information is then editable on site, the same way if you were doing it with a potentially just a standalone PDF smart form, but you can upload a smart PDF form. So the key thing with what I've explained there is there's 2 different types of forms. There's an out-of-the-box form, which gives you these type of list questions. And the second type of form that you can choose is you can upload your own smart PDF form. Both forms, perform quite well, obviously, on site, depending how you want to use them. I personally prefer the out-of-the-box form, purely because the questions are just a little bit more customizable, and what you can pull from the reporting of them is quite customizable as well. And I'll show that on screen in a moment as well. So we've got a series of different forms here, various ones with lots of different ID numbers down the middle of them. So I'll point this out because every time I create a form on site, it will automatically give the next sequential number. So that's an automatic identification number that's applied to every single form. You don't need to worry about the next form is going to be number 83 or number 10,052. It will automatically generate that number for you. So that's something that you don't need to worry about. And then when it comes back to reporting, you're able to know the number of a form, for example, that's included in the report. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just open up the iPad on screen. So just give me 2 moments. I'm going to open up the iPad on screen and I'm going to complete a form on the iPad device itself. So what I want to just explain was kind of the structure that happened in the background, part of the actual form structure in there itself. So I'm just going to minimize my web browser in the background. I'm going to minimize that. And what I'm going to do is this, just large screen my mobile app. So what I've done here is shared my iPad screen, just using a screen mirroring app. So I've shared my screen, and what I have here is my project that I was just in my web browser. But let's say I'm on site, and I've opened up the iPad, I'm walking around site, and maybe I want to create a form. I come into my form section, and what I can see is any forms that are available to me that are in draft forms, or they're uncompleted forms. First fix carpentry, whether it's BCAR, electrical installation, or anything like that. And then I've also got some other forms that I can look at across here, that I can choose from various different templates, and I can choose what form potentially that I want to implement or utilize at that moment. So let's say, so what I'm going to do is just going to go across here. So let's say there's a door installation happening on site, or a series of door installations. I can pull up that form, and you can see it's automatically in the right hand side here. You can see that it's gone to number 83. So what I can do while I'm in here is I can also select a location. I can go, okay, well, I'm actually in unit number 1. It could be hotel rooms, apartment scheme, anything like that, or even pharmaceutical project with various zoning naming. So I can customize all of that type of zoning naming as well. And again, from a reporting point of view, if I have the location in, I can also report on everything for unit 001 or zone 001, depending on your type of project. I can also automate that location, by the way. I can scan a barcode on site, and it will automatically populate that location. So if I generate either QR codes or barcodes before I do any of my checklists, and if we have them on site, if there's somewhere to obviously install a barcode, there's not always, depending on the stage of construction, of course. I can scan that barcode, and it will associate then the checklist with the particular barcode as well. So that's another potential workflow you can do with from a barcoding point of view. So what I can see here is this checklist is currently assigned to me. I could, if I wanted to, I could assign it to someone else if I want to. I can assign it to the architect or someone else that's responsible for this. Just for now, I'm just going to leave myself kind of execute this on site. So what I'm going to do, one of the questions was number of hinges installed. So very simple question. So I'm going to say there's 4 hinges installed on that door. And these are all custom questions I built as well. What it's requiring me to do is it's requiring me to add a photograph. So what I built into the actual template was I said that if, when someone executes this question for a number of hinges installed, and it could be any question, I require them to add a photograph. So I can actually add a photograph. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select, I can take a photograph, but I'm just going to pull one from my library here. I have one, I think, of door hinges somewhere. So what I'm going to do is just pull one of a door that I have. So that's one that I had already. So I could obviously take one on site. So that photograph is now associated specifically with that question. Associate that photograph, height of door handle. So very straightforward questions here. The way I designed this question is, so let's say for this particular door, I've said if it's 700 mil, that's a compliant door handle height for this particular project. If it's not 700 mil, it's non-compliant. So if I go it's non-compliant, it's going to require me to generate an issue. So an issue is an observation or a problem, we could call it. So because it's non-compliant, it's requiring me to raise an observation. So there's a conditional logic built into this form. So what I could do then is I can add an issue, and that issue I can assign back to someone to say, why is this door handle not at 700 mil, for example, or whatever the required height was as well. I could have designed that answer into it. But just for speed, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say non-conformance on that. So that's NC. I'm going to add an issue very quickly. I'm going to create an issue, and I can say it's a non-conformance issue. But what I can do with that issue, this issue is associated with the form, but it's also standalone in a way as well from a reporting point of view. And I'll show that once we get into the reporting as well. So I'm actually going to assign this to an individual. So we'll assign it back to, I'll assign it back to this architect guy. Let's say they're responsible. That issue, and they're going to see it's non-conformance. I can put in text and other types of information, but I don't need to, because the non-conformance is going to be self-explanatory, because they're going to see the answer is non-conformance on that. So straightforward on that. Is a fire strip a continuous seal? I'm going to say yes. keep it nice and easy. Any damage to fire seal, I'm going to say no, and then it requires me to generate a signature, press save on that. And I can, if I want to, I can add other photographs at the end of it. So I could, if I wanted to, come in here and I could take a photograph if I really needed to. So you're just seeing a photograph of my desk, by the way. Press select on that, and I can associate that particular photograph. That done. So that photograph is now associated with the overall form rather than a specific question. I could also, if I wanted to here, could associate this form with other information, things like assets, other forms, other issues, and other files, whether that's a drawing or anything like that. So that's one way to execute a list or a checklist on site. There's a couple of different ways we can also get into a bit more detail with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press submit on that. I could also add comments to this as well, by the way. I could add comments if I had a concern or to raise a concern. So I'm going to press submit on that. So what would have happened there is that that form has been submitted. So I'm going to all forms. So what I'll actually see now when I go back into my desktop is what I'm going to see a couple of things. So I'm going to see that site observation that was raised, but I'm going to see that form that was also completed as well. So if I go back into forms. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to come out of the iPad for a moment. I can also see those photographs when I go into the photo section as well. So even though I took a photograph on the form, it independently captures those photographs within inside the photo section as well. So there are a couple of other photographs. That's the photograph I took on my iPad there. You can see there's a little symbol on it in the bottom of the kind of photograph. That means it's associated with a form. The same if I go through any of these, if they're associated with a form, it gives me a tiny little symbol to tell me what it's associated with as well. So it captures that independently of the form as well. If I also go into issues on the iPad just very briefly, so what I'm going to do is just clear that for a moment. So if I go into the iPad very briefly, what I'll see is that issue that was also generated on site as well. So what I'll see is that issue that I generated on site, and that will come into my observation list that was associated with that particular form as well. And I'll show you that once I get into the reporting. So that's a very simple form that was executed on site. And obviously that goes into the platform. So in the web browser, that form is immediately available to the rest of the design team, provided you're connected to a wireless or Wi-Fi connection. If you're not connected to a wireless or Wi-Fi connection, it will sync once you get back, to your 4G, 5G, or Wi-Fi connection as well. So it won't lose the form entirely whatsoever as well. So that form will be now available to the rest of the team as well, as part of that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to jump away from the iPad, and we're going to come back into the web browser, and we're just going to look at how that form has actually been interpreted now once I get back into the web browser. So once I come back into the web browser, I'm back in the same project. So what I'll actually see now when I press refresh, so we'll see the next form. So there's form number 83. I can see the status of it is submitted, and I can see it's unit 01. So based on all of these forms, I can see unit 1 appears a couple of times. So what I could actually do is I could actually filter on unit 1, for example. So that it could be room naming, zone naming, any type of space naming you want to apply to your project. You can bring that into the build platform. So now I can look at every form that's been submitted for unit 001. I can know, okay, well, the panel install is still in draft. Why is it still in draft? I can observe that and maybe generate a report. What I can also do from inside here, so let's say I filtered on every form that's been submitted for this particular unit. I can export the filtered list. So when it says export, that means it will turn it into a report. So I can either choose a PDF report or an Excel report. And what I could do is I can generate that report. It may take a couple of minutes because there's kind of 12 forms in it. So we'll just let that happen in the background. When that form generates, it will actually come into the report section in here on the left-hand side. And I'll also receive an email link. So I'll be notified twice about it effectively. I'll get an email, and I can also come in here and it'll be available to me as well. So I'm just going to let that tick away in the background. If I come into reports, then just for a moment, I'll just see, it should be probably a spinning wheel on it. It is, so it's just a slight spinning wheel on that. It's been generated. And what I'm going to show you is another very quick report that looks very similar to what we looked at as part of that as well. So what I'm going to do is, So what I can also look at, so let's say that was a B card form, for example. Okay, that form is actually available now. There we go, nice and quick. So I can download this report, I can share the report. I can also automate those reports to run as well, a separate workflow. So I'll download that report for now. So here's the report that I just generated. It's all based on the filtering of unit 01, so only showing forms. In this case, there's 12 forms, my name and the date and time that it was generated as part of that as well. So what it gives me is kind of just a headline item of all of the forms that are showing me effectively. So it's like a table of contents effectively. I can click on any of these forms and it will actually jump to that report element within inside the form. So what it's reporting is exactly what it finds inside the forms area. So it's pulled all of these forms and it's just put it into a nice tidy PDF form for me. It's branded it with whatever your company logo is in the top right here. You can upload any sort of company logo for yourself. So what it does is give me a complete report on all those 12 checklists or forms that were executed, including if there were PDF smart forms, it would also show me that checklist as well as part of that as well. So if I now, what I'm going to do is just going to come back up here and I'm going to go to that form that I showed you on the iPad. So let's say it's a door installation. So it's showing me the answer to the question, number of hinges installed. But it's also showing me the non-conformance issue for the height of the door handle. So it showed me a photograph that was there. This was another photograph that just happened to be associated with it. Showed me the photograph I added, who it was taken by, the name of the photograph, all that kind of stuff, date and time added on. But what it's also showing me is the issue. So the issue was the non-conformance, if you remember, for the height of the door handle. So it's showing me that issue and it's showing me as an open status. So that means the issue isn't closed, separate to the form as well. And then the answers to the other questions as well, and anything that was signed, and then the kind of general photograph that we added at the end. So that's what a typical report looks like. And again, into any other forms that I generated on site as well, I can see, you know, this is one for concrete installation or roofing installation, for example. I can see the information that was associated with that as well. So again, if I just come back up to this one that I did work on, so let's say there was an issue on site, and that's the non-conformance issue that was generated. If I've received this form, so let's say this form has been emailed to someone else, or you've shared it with someone else, even though it's a PDF, if they actually click on that issue, it will bring them into their ACC build environment, and it will actually bring them into that issue as well. So the forms, they have live hyperlinks in them effectively, and they're automatically generated based on the issues and based on the information. Those hyperlinks are, you know, they do extend to other functions within inside the platform as well. Whatever type, sorry, just looking for, sorry, I've closed that form. I've actually closed that form. But the hyperlinks work for other issues, other forms, and other types of functionality in the platform. And what I can see now is the issue that was associated with that form. So issues are a separate area within inside build. So it is interconnected. So I can see issues here on the left-hand side. We originally started in forms, and then my form is still in there as a form number 83, whatever it is. And I can see an issue has been generated. But what I can actually see with the issue, automatically it's associated with a form. So when I create something associated with a form, it's bi-directional. So it automatically associated the form with the issue, and vice versa. The form is automatically associated with the issue in both directions as well. If I actually click on activity log, for example, I can see when that issue was created as well. So I can see that type of information as part of that as well. And again, this issue can then go through a cycle of being resolved, whatever the manner in which that needs to be resolved as part of that as well. If I click on this form item, it will bring me into that form that I was in as well. So again, it brings that interconnection with inside the platform itself. And again, I can see that completed form, and I can see who was involved in that form as well, who the contributors were as part of that particular form, just for that particular instance as well. Obviously, forms can have a lot more questions and complexity built into them. So if I just come back into my form section, and what I'm going to show you now, what we looked at was executing the forms on site. I showed you some of the reporting. What I'm going to show you now is actually the template behind that form and for that door installation very simple kind of site task of a door installation. It could be concrete or any type of construction material or work or labor work that's occurring on site as well. So if I come into door installation, what I'm going to look at briefly is the template behind that actual form. So this is the template. Because I'm an administrator, I can come in here and edit this template for the door installation, and I can build it in any sort of manner. What we had was our question. We had our first question, number of hinges installed. And what I built into this question was actually a drop-down response. So I gave it a series of responses. I could have changed that to a text response, number response, single selection or multi-selection response, even a date as well. So these are the questions that I built into it. When I was prompted to add a photograph to that I was prompted to add a photograph, if you remember, when it asked me, number of hinges on that particular project or on that particular question or that door. Because I chose something called conditional logic, so I'm just going to turn that off for a second. Fine, I'm going to turn that off for a second, and you'll notice that this kind of selection area on the right disappeared. And now I'm going to turn that back on. The reason I wanted to show you how that affects it. So the reason it asked me for a photograph for each question that it asked is because I set it as a conditional logic. So I said, okay, if it has 4 hinges, I want a photograph of it. It's just proof of it, and that can be from a BCAR or building inspection or any type of I suppose reason or rationale that you need to have a photograph. So I can require a photograph. I can also suggest a photograph. For example, if it's a not applicable answer for whatever reason, it could be a sliding door that doesn't have any hinges. I could go out, well, I'll suggest a photograph. So that just prompts me to suggest a photograph. I don't have to associate a photograph, but I can choose whether it requires or just give the option to associate a photograph. If there's no hinges on a door, I can go, okay, well, I require an issue. Why is there no issue? Why is there no hinges on the door? For whatever reason that happens. Sliding door obviously is a fair scenario. If there's only one hinge, that's probably an issue. So let's require an issue. So I can prompt for either a photograph or an issue to be associated with each answer as well. And that's what I did with the non-conformance. When it wasn't 700 mil, I required an issue to be raised as well. And I can make these questions to be required questions as well. So you can see this is a required question. I can make all of these to be required questions as part of that as well. And again, I require a photo. Even if it does conform, I want a photograph. I want that for my audit trail as well. So again, I can prompt that as part of that. And again, the other questions, I could have built that into it as well. And again, I required a signature at the end. So very straightforward. This is a very simple, two kind of question forms with some sub questions in between. I can add other questions to this form as well. I can go, okay, well, I want to add another question. Maybe I want to know about the materials being captured on site as well. What was the weather like on site? I can also add that in to that as well, and it will record that on the location of the actual project inside APC. It connects into, I think it's weather.com. If I want to know the equipment that was used on site as well, I can make that a required question. Work log, make that a required question, adding in different crew names. Or I can just add in different sections of questions as well, and I can completely create, glass damage, for example, glass damage, or if it has a vision panel, for example, and I can say, okay, well, I want that to be a drop-down response, either yes or no, or I can put it in a text box if I want to say yes for that, no for that, and maybe I want to give an NA answer as well if it's not applicable. I can make that a required question as well, is glass damage as well. So I can then, let's say, okay, well, I want my signature obviously to be at the bottom of the form. I can simply just move that down the form. Sorry, what I need to do is I need to move these ones up. So what I can do then is I can actually move these throughout the form, and I can edit the form accordingly as well. What I'm doing is I'm changing the door installation form for that. So I'm going to press save on that, for example. And again, if someone comes to execute that form the next time, it will have all of those questions built into it. So again, if I go to create form and go door installation, whether it's on site or on the iPad or whether I do it on this device, I'm going to see all those additional questions that I requested, that I just added into that particular form. Obviously, when I change a template, it's not going to affect any previously completed or submitted forms as part of that. the workflow as well. So that's it at kind of a high level on forms. Went into some level of detail, but there's some other areas I'd like to show you as well, and how you can also integrate forms with various other types of workflows. So let's say, for example, maybe you're, if you're working in Irish type projects, you may be executing BCAR on site, and you need to execute your building control, for building regulation compliance on site. You can create your forms, you can have a BCAR completion form, for example. You can associate that, does it comply with part A, part B, part C, and you can have other drill down questions as part of that. But what you could also do with a form is, let's say you have your inspection schedule or an inspection test plan, or depending what type of schedule you have. But inside the schedule area, inside Build itself, you can upload an inspection schedule with start dates and end dates. So for this particular one, I had unit 001, which could be an apartment or hotel room, for example. And for each of, various type of trades or disciplines that needs to, execute work on that particular unit, first fix electrical, second or first fix carpentry, and so on, floor colours, plasterboarding, plastering. What I could have done with this is I upload my schedule with my start date, so 7th of September, 8th of September, and I've got all my different units. I've uploaded this from a Microsoft project file, by the way. So if I actually go into references, I could associate a form with that particular line item. Associate that with a line item, so that's for first fix electrical. So when someone comes on site, this form is automatically connected into your schedule. You can come into your schedule if you need to, and you can go, okay, well, first fix carpentry is still in draft. The fire colours form is still in draft. So I can see from this information then, I can see that these forms are not yet complete. So either it's a case that I come into this form, and if I'm the person responsible for it, it will bring me into that form, and then I can start to answer the various questions, and then I can finalize that form. And immediately when I submit that form, even though I've come from schedule in here, the status of that form will then change as well. So I'm able to associate an inspection test plan, a BCAR inspection plan, or any type of construction stage inspection plan. I can associate the relevant form with whatever the relevant particular inspection item is. And you can structure this. This is entirely customizable to structure however you want. I just did it unit by unit and then trade by trade effectively that needed to execute a form or submit a form as part of that as well. So again, unit 001, I could generate a report based on all this information the same way I did a moment ago as well. I could also just have a form at a higher level of unit 001. So maybe I have just a window installation form for unit 001, and I can see that that's been submitted. If I now click on that, it's going to bring me into that submitted form that is associated with that particular item, and I can see the various answers, who submitted it, and other information that is associated with it as well. So what you'll notice throughout the ACC or Autodesk Construction Cloud platform is you'll see something called references, and this exists in quite a number of other areas, including forms, including schedules, including RFIs, and those type of areas as well. So what I see down here is a link to something called assets. So in here, I could have linked to another form, I could have linked to an issue. What I've also associated with this particular form is something called an asset. So an asset is, it's something that getting installed on a project. It could be windows, doors, air handling units, sanitary ware, anything like that that's getting installed, fire protection. And I can create something called an asset list inside the project. So before I very briefly get into that, so what we initially started with was looking at a form. So very simple, looking at a form, how you execute a form. What I've now gone into is kind of showing you different areas that you can choose to associate with that form if you want to. You can just use the forms as they are out of the box. But what I'm showing you is additional areas within the platform that you could potentially associate with the forms. And I see this being used on live projects on a daily basis, by the way, just to explain that. So again, I'm going to come back into the assets area. So again, what we've done in the assets area is we've associated certain form information with asset information. So that brought me into what I clicked on. That form was an asset, and it was called Windows. So that window has a number, and if I go into references, I can see that asset also has the same forms associated with it. So again, in both directions, what I'm seeing is the form associated with that asset. But assets now can actually be a 3D model. And this is only something that was added in recent months. So an asset, yes, it can be a line item. In this case, it can be a length of pipe. It can be a roof. It can be, anything like that, a floor panel, precast floor panel. So if I click on this precast floor panel, what I can see in here is I can see my asset item. I can see a barcode number. So that means if I scan this on site, for example, it will bring up this asset information. And I could also see if there's a form associated with it. So what I could also do very quickly is I could show you here. So this asset was actually imported from a Revit model. So I imported a Revit model and I actually extracted some of the parametric information I extracted, this is actually I extracted the code from Revit, and that's what has become the barcode. I can associate location information from Revit using this as well. But what I can also do is I can click on the Revit model, and it's going to bring me into that particular panel that's associated with that particular asset. And it shows me that precast panel for that building as well. So what I'm seeing here is I'm seeing the asset, but if I go into references, I'm also seeing the particular form that should be associated with it. Now, forgive me, that's a precast wall panel, maybe it's a floor panel, but I associated that form with this. So what I'm having here is I'm having the 3D model, or your BIM model, is associated with the particular form. I can click on that form. It will bring me into that form that's associated with that 3D object. And I can see any of the questions that were executed as part of that information as well. And again, I can see if there's other associated information as part of that particular form as well. In this case, for all of the panels, there is a particular form that was executed, and that's why you're seeing all of those forms associated with it as well. What I can also do with those assets, and I mentioned it briefly there, was the barcoding. So again, very quickly, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to jump into my iPad. So 2 moments, I'm going to jump into my iPad again. Into my iPad, and what I'm going to do is on my device, I'm going to come into my assets. So if I come into my assets, this is just another functionality when you hit the kind of more button, it brings me into assets here. So if I click on assets, for example, it's showing me that same list of line items that I saw on the web browser. But what I can also do is I can scan a barcode. So if I had a barcode, I can scan a barcode, and what it would do is it would bring up the relevant barcode for that item. So let's say, for example, it's a roofing element. It would bring up that particular asset or that roofing element as well. Is there a form associated with it? In this case, there's a panel install form associated with it as well. So again, what we saw on the web browser is accessible on the mobile device, and adding in that, I suppose, extra level of either QR coding or barcoding is going to automate a lot of that for your teams on site. Whether they're designers or installers or anybody working for contractors as well. You can use that barcoding system on site to associate those assets. Those assets are associated with forms. I can click on that form. It will bring me into the form. And then with that asset, it'll go any damage to unit. I can say no, number of units installed. So this form is currently in draft. The location information is up there. You can see it at the top. And I can add in various different information as well. I can go, okay, well, I want to, add another photograph, again, just showing you my boring desk. Associate that photograph with that item. Press done on that. Again, that photograph is now associated with the asset, is now associated with the form. And that form is associated with the asset, not to confuse things. But again, the platform is about building in those different links from different areas, from forms to assets, from forms to issues as well. And again, I can then submit this form. Okay, I'm happy with this form. I can press submit on this form, submit. If there's any required questions, it would prompt me to actually submit that form. And now that form is now going to be completed for that particular asset. What I can also do with those assets then as well, if I come back into my web browser. So what I can also do with those assets is I can also report on those assets. So there's a couple of different ways I can report on my assets. But what I can do, again, generate a filter, and I can go, okay, well, I want to see, the different status of assets. So, if it's a room completion, I can see wherever the framing's installed, fix electrical. In any of these assets, there's something called a status. So if I drop down this status, I can customize these statuses to suit the particular category. So roofing may have one type of status, specified, ordered, delivered, installed. But units, for example, the rooms, they may have a different type of status, ready for handover, first fix electrical, first fix mechanical. And again, I can filter on all of these statuses. So if I now filter, I can go, okay, well, I want to see everything for tower number 1. If I have, I have some stuff in there for tower number 1. And I only want to see items that have been installed, pre-startup, ordered, depending on what status it is. And I can do things like room complete or as built. They're custom fields that I can build into my assets as well. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to export that to a report. I'm going to run that report. I'll leave that happen in the background. So what I've done here is I've generated a report, but it's on the assets feature. What you notice is we kind of moved from forms, we moved into issues, we moved into schedule, and then we moved into assets as well. So we've covered quite a bit there. But the key thing that I want to show is that you can connect everything back to a checklist or back to a form, regardless of what area it is that you want to use in the platform itself. I could even go into photographs. I could click on a photograph, for example, again. If I click on one of these photographs and show me that photograph and showing me the form that was associated with as well. So again, that link is built into the platform as well. And that link is automatically built in. I didn't need to do it in the other area whatsoever. So we've gone into quite a number of areas there. But again, the crux of what I'm trying to explain today is those kind of checklist construction workflow forms. You can keep them as simple as you want. Very, very simple, just questions. And you can report on all that information. And you can also, the reports I showed you initially was a PDF report, but I can also do an Excel report, which is obviously quite powerful when it comes to things like Power BI. So I can pull out, for example, this one is one of the door installation reports. It shows me the report. There's a door installation. It's showing me the various different information, and then it's showing me the answers to the questions. I can see the number of the form, the number of hinges, the height of the door handle. If this is quantifiable information, I could obviously then do calculations. I could push it into Power BI. And again, this is all pulled from that ACC form that would have been executed potentially on an iPad or a mobile device on site as well after it was submitted in the similar type of manner that I showed you as well. What I will just finish off by saying, again, forms, keep them as simple or as complex as you need to keep them on your particular project. The reporting can be filtered on a lot of the information that we see inside the forms, location, the type of form, the whether it's health and safety, observation on a form as well. And then the issues are quite powerful in the platform because the issues kind of create tasks or activities that need to be actioned, either based on forms or based on other functionality within the platform as well. And then things I obviously didn't touch on is things like RFIs. I could create an RFI and I could associate that with a form and vice versa as well, but I won't. I'll leave out of RFIs today. But hopefully that was beneficial. Happy to take any questions now. And yeah, if you have any other follow-up questions, happy to get back to you by email later. So thank you very much. I will now, I see there's a question in there. So let's have a look at that now. Give me a moment. So someone asked, is there access to the recording? There is access to recording, Kevin. Thank you very much. Any other questions from anyone or anybody have anything whatsoever? Please just pop in the Q&A or chat box, whichever is easiest for you. Okay, hopefully I gave you enough information. But if you've any, sorry, there's another one. Is Build included in the Revit Suite subscription? That's a very good question. It is not included in the Revit Suite subscription. So Revit is either bought standalone or as an AEC collection. Build is a standalone subscription. And there's a couple of different business models. You can buy individual licenses per person. You can buy a project license, which gives unlimited access to people on that project. And then you have unlimited company licensing as well. So that gives you unlimited licensing for you and your supply chain, by the way. If you want to talk to somebody about that, if you want to drop me an email, my email is jonathan@biotech.ie. Sorry, I'll just will yeah, Jonathan@diatech.ie. If you want to send me an email, we can get back to you about pricing for something you want to discuss. But there's lots of other types of functionality in the build platform as well. All we did today was we only focused on the checklist area. RFIs, submittals, all of that good stuff exists in there. Even placing issues on sheets and stuff like that, we didn't look at. We just looked at the checklist workflows. There's a lot of other stuff in there as well. So I'm happy to run through that with anyone on future sessions. There's a question. If I had 10 spools of pipe associated with a boiler, could I track install progress, QA, etc. for these? I expect I could. But Paul, yeah, I suppose in theory you certainly could. So that would probably be done through the assets feature. So you'd probably import those assets if you're pulling them from Plant 3D, for example. You could import a list of Excel sheet assets from a Plant 3D export. You can import a list of assets either from a Revit model or from an Excel data sheet, and you could associate that progress. You certainly can. Something else I will point out then, just on the reporting side of it, very quickly, what I'll actually show you is just on the reporting side of it, what I showed you was out of the box reporting. That's not necessarily going to suit every organization because, you know, let's face it, everyone wants to maybe report in a certain different type of manner. Inside the build platform, you get something called Insight. Insight is it's kind of a high level reporting area. But what you can actually do in Insight, and there's my Power BI dashboard coming up. If I actually go into my Power BI dashboard, there we go. Oh, that has assets. And what I did was I actually built a custom dashboard using Power BI. So this is a Microsoft link basically, and using something called a data connector. This data connector is part of the build platform. I can live push information into Power BI and it will report it back to me inside here as well. So if I look at just the assets on the project, I'm going to big screen this, or as big as it will go. I could also, it will also bring me into Power BI as well. Power BI is a huge, I suppose, factor inside of this. And I see lots and lots more companies using Power BI. So I've come into assets on a project. This is showing me, for example, all of my assets on a project. So up here, I can see, you know, who's associated with the various different assets, the project name, the number of assets. It's quite a low number. I agree. You know, you could have thousands or hundreds in there. I can see the project, but what I can see on each project is I can actually see on each project, I can see the number of assets that have been, you know, certain statuses have been changed. What I've done here is I've specifically come into one project, and this is another project I had ready. So I've come into another project. There's my list of assets. These are the same assets that I would have seen inside that particular project. And I can see, okay, well, I can see the green is BCAR complete. So my units are only 33.33% or a third complete. My doors are, you know, a third delivered. So all of these statuses are updated on these status, the asset statuses as well. That's where it's pulling this information from, depending on which project you're in. So again, the reporting in Power BI is a way in relation to your pipe question as well. That's one way of tracking all of that using this as well. I could jump to other projects if I had them noted in here as well. But again, Power BI, very powerful way to look at, you know, primary water pump installation, half them are installed, for example. So it's showing me that there, and it's showing me the various status color here on the right hand side. So Power BI, very, very powerful. There's also other out of the box type reporting that I can see in here. RFI is what I'm just looking for, is quality. I can look at things like issues that were generated on site or health and safety issues as well. Forms obviously applies. I can build a health and safety form. You know, if an accident or incident happens on site, I can report that inside my forms as well. I can assign that back to responsible company, and then I can report on the safety issues against a certain company, subcontractor, supply chain on a construction site as part of that as well. Okay, so I think if there's no more questions, let me see. Brilliant. That's fantastic. Yes, so feel free to drop me an email. It's jonathan@diatech.ie. If you have any questions, if you want to understand pricing, we can get one of our account managers to get in contact with you, and they can update you on that. But it is, I mean, Autodesk Build, we're seeing being used a lot more. particularly the account-based build. The reason for that, if you have account-based build, like I said, you can give that to your supply chain. Your supply chain don't necessarily have to be, staff members of your company. They can be subcontractors or other companies you're working with. You could be a main contractor, and you can provide a license under that account-based licensing, which is an unlimited licensing type model as well. Or you can just have individual licensing if you're a one person or small firm that only needs one license for yourself as well. So feel free to get in contact and happily to take that further with someone in the Diatech team. So I'll leave it there for today. The recording will be available, of course. Thanks very much for joining. And again, we run these sessions the first Friday of every month, and we do a different topic every single month as well. Something within ACC generally on the BIM side of it, whether it's design or construction. So thanks a million, everybody. Enjoy your long weekend, which is great to remember. That's this weekend. And I'll speak to you next time. Thank you very much.